Hello. It is Tuesday. I forgot to set a reminder notice on Facebook that we are doing this morning. So I'm going to sit here and chat for a few minutes. Hi, Sherry. While people get online. Yay, Francesca, good. So sorry, I should have set a reminder. I did post that I would be finally getting to this glycerite class this morning. But then I was like racing around. I just got here like 5 minutes ago and grabbed everything and threw it on and washed my hands and put my hair back. So I did want to, since this has been delayed because of a number of different things, I wanted to be here today definitely and get this going. Also, the light from the front window is like super bright on this side, and I don't have balancing light here. So sorry, weird. Hi, Susan. Weird light. Oh, Susan, hold on just a moment. I want to point out, I just got my new leaf order in. I want to point out that one of the books that I sell here is Susan Hess's awesome, relatively new-ish book with another fabulous herbalist. Oh, and I'm realizing I didn't flip the thing. Shoot, we might all be backwards. Anyway, this is Susan's book, Herbal Medicine Cookbook. Super gorgeous, fabulous recipes. Look at these recipes. Really, really great, fun way of combining culinary herbs and medicinal herbs and food. So I dig this, and just got a couple of copies in yesterday. So there you go, Susan. Thank you for writing such an awesome book. Thank you and Tina both for that. I want to get that off because that isn't my book. And I don't want to get glycerite stuff all over it. My book is already messy. Okay, so I would, Francesca, I would go into a bookstore and special order it because Susan, correct me if I'm wrong with this, but if you go into a store, into your local bookstore, number one, you're supporting your local bookstore, but number two, it generates buzz around that book and they may go, hey, maybe we should order a couple more copies of this for our shelves. So that's where you should, that's where you should buy one, Francesca, if that works for you, or wherever Susan suggests there. Okay, so dried plant glycerites. So we've talked about water as a solvent, and we've talked about alcohol and water as a solvent. So our third solvent that we're discussing is glycerin. So glycerin, yeah, I thought that might be because you're in the boonies now. See what happens when you move away from Long Beach? Glycerin. Where does glycerin come from? That's a good question. I'm glad you asked. I also, because I had to be speedy because I was late, I didn't set up pretty in front of the herbs, but I sure do love having my big dry erase board here instead of the floppy one. Glycerin, synonymous with glycerol. Okay. So you might more often, I'm going to see if I can fix that backwards stuff because that is bugging me. Oh, yes, I can. Here, hold on. Sorry, I'm in your face right now. But it is for your own good. There we go. And now you can read what's on the board. Okay, so glycerol, glycerin. So where does that come from? If we look at a droplet of oil. There's a droplet of oil. Coconut oil. It's coconut oil. So a coconut oil molecule is made up of a backbone of glycerol. Okay, so we have a backbone of glycerol, and attached to that backbone are various different fatty acids. So we may have what are the caprylic acid? I don't remember the specific fatty acids in coconut oil, I'm sorry. But we'll say caprylic acid and lauric acid and palmitic acid and oleic acid and linoleic acid, for example, some of the more common fatty acids. So each different fat or oil is distinguished by having different fatty acids attached to this glycerol backbone, right? So olive oil versus coconut oil versus avocado oil, the difference in the fat itself. Now there's other constituents that are also found in with that. So avocado oil is the oil, but it also has a lot of polyphenolic compounds in there that give it the deep green color, and it's got chlorophyll and various other things. But just in the fat itself is this structure right here. Now these fatty acids have specific uses in industry and in medicine. So quite often they are, when we buy, you can buy supplements of caprylic acid. It's an antifungal agent, a therapeutic agent. And palmitic acid is a solidifying agent. Linoleic acid is an omega-6 fat, and it's not really used as an isolated compound. Other ones are. What we can also have this as a byproduct of is soap making. In soap making, the saponification process, the process of making soap, you have an alkali, sodium hydroxide, and you have a fat, coconut oil, and the alkali and the fat, when they come together in a solution, there's going to be a chemical reaction called saponification. That is the change in the structure of specific fatty acids. The saponifiable fatty acids, there are, I'm not going to go too deep into this, there are unsaponifiable fatty acids, which is why there are certain fats that you can't really use to make soaps with. But so that saponification process will bind these specific fats in that chemical process, leaving a byproduct of glycerol. Biofuel also leaves glycerol as a byproduct. Other industries do. I'm sorry, you know what? I didn't. There you go. Susan, you can totally plug your website here. You have my permission. But yeah, that even better than ordering from your bookstore is ordering directly from Susan. Awesome. So after those fatty acids are taken off, you're left with that glycerin as a byproduct. So glycerin has a sweet flavor, a sweet syrupy flavor, sort of a like a syrupy flavor, and consistency, mouthfeel. But it's not a carbohydrate. It is a byproduct of, it's a part of a fat molecule. But it's sweet and syrupy. So we call it glycerin. And a glycerite is an extract of plants using glycerin as your solvent, or glycerin and water as your solvent. Now, the ratio of glycerin and water, I'm going to be working primarily with dried plants today, and so we are always going to use a dilute glycerin solution. This is glycerin, by the way, so it's clear, doesn't smell like anything, really, really neutral, kind of thick. You can see the viscosity of it. That, because it is so viscous, it is, oh great Susan, thanks. Because it's so viscous, a really viscous fluid like that can't really move into the cellular structure of herbs in order to extract the constituents, which is what we want them to do. So we dilute it with water to make it less viscous, also more pleasant. It's really cloyingly sweet. It's kind of nastily sweet. So we dilute it. Now, different herbalists are going to have different ratios for dilution. I've seen some people dilute as much as 50-50 water to glycerin. I think that's way too much water in it. It's going to shorten the shelf life, and it just makes it too thin. I don't like that. But primarily, it's going to shorten the shelf life. The more water you have, the more possibility of funky stuff growing in there. Glycerin is a preservative as well as a solvent, but it only will preserve so much. And its preservative qualities decrease as its concentration in your solvent decreases in your menstruum. So my preference is 75% glycerin and water at 25%. That's my preferred ratio. So a 3-to-1 ratio, basically, right? So 3-to-1 ratio, or 75% glycerin, if that's easier for you to think about. So unlike making a tincture with the alcohol, where you're adjusting that alcohol and water relationship up and down all the time, you don't have to do that really with glycerin. In a dry plant, I'm using this, 75-25. In a fresh plant, I'm using undiluted glycerin. I'm just using the pure glycerin because the fresh plant is bringing its own water to the party, and that will dilute in and of itself. And the high amount of glycerin outside of the cell has a drawing effect and will be a more effective solvent for extraction of those constituents. So 75% glycerin is what we're going to be working with today. But if you'll see other people like Thomas Easley uses, I think, a 66%, so it's a 2-to-1 ratio instead of a 3-to-1 ratio of glycerin. Again, I think that's too much water, and it's too dilute. But still makes good medicine. I'm not going to say that Thomas doesn't make good medicine. So that's our first thing. Now, because it is a ratio, a 3-to-1 ratio all the time, what I like to do is I just make up a dilute glycerin menstruum, a 3-to-1 ratio dilute glycerin menstruum. I will put 3 cups of glycerin and 1 cup of water into a quart jar, and then I just keep this. That way, all I need to do is to measure this out. I don't have to futz with how much of the glycerin and how much of the water and all of that. So I strongly urge you to do that. Otherwise, you'll futz. The ratios are generally going to be the same as when we talked about when we did the tincture making video. And if you didn't watch the tincture making video, go and watch that, because a lot of what we're referencing here, I went into in great detail there, so I'm not going to do it again. But it's a standard 1-to-5 weight to volume ratio. So for every 1 ounce by weight of herbs, we're going to use 5 ounces by volume of glycerin. Now that doesn't always work to cover the plant material. A great example of this is chamomile glycerite. It's one of my favorite plants to make a glycerite with. And this is a chamomile glycerite. So you see that lovely golden color. And it's got that really, so strong. It's just really concentrated chamomile flavor. I mean, you can taste the strength of that medicine. By the way, that plant, that formula, the chamomile glycerite, is a favorite amongst parents and children. Children will self-care, will engage in self-care. I wanted to say self-medicate, and I don't like that word because I don't think it's a medication. But they will care for themselves if they realize that they're feeling anxious or just kind of in need of the support of chamomile. I know a number of kids who have their own bottles of chamomile glycerite, and as they need it, they will just kind of dose themselves. It's chamomile glycerite. It's totally fine as long as they don't have an allergy to it. And they are learning to listen to their body and respect those messages of, wow, I'm not feeling safe and I need a little bit of support, and here's some of my chamomile glycerite. So it's a great thing to do if you have kids, or if you want to do medicine making with kids. Make a chamomile glycerite for them. It's awesome. So really good, strong medicine. But chamomile has a lot of mucilage in it. Chamomile tends to swell up and absorb a lot of the marc, the plant material in there. So if you are making a 1-to-5 glycerite of chamomile, generally the chamomile just becomes, it just absorbs all of the menstruum, and you just have this kind of block of gooey chamomile powder in there. So oftentimes I need to go to a 1-to-7, and that's what's on my label here. Whoops, there you go. So a 1-to-7 ratio is generally what I do with chamomile. Rose is the same way. that I just need a higher amount of the menstruum to the plant material in order to cover it and get full extraction. And it still is really, really strong. It still is a very, very strong medicine. Yeah, that is feeding. Feel free to ask any questions if you want to on the feed while we're doing this. So the herb that I'm going to demonstrate today is California poppy. I like California poppy as a glycerite. It works really well. I love it as a fresh plant glycerite, but there's no fresh California poppies in abundance right now. So I will wait until the spring to make that. So I'm just making a dried plant glycerite in order to get me through the winter, the long, cold winter of Southern California. So I'm going to I have a quart jar here, and so I'm going to do about 3 ounces of California poppy. I get my scale. So 3 ounces of California poppy. It's an herb. It's a leaf and flower, and it is pretty fluffy. So this is a little bit more. So this is 3 ounces of California poppy. It's about 2 cups by volume. Elderberry makes a great glycerite, Marty. And I like elderberry as a glycerite because it's that sweetness for people who are used to syrups. But glycerin isn't a sugar, and it's not metabolized as a sugar. It has a little bit of an effect on blood sugar levels, right? It's not a net zero effect, but it's a pretty mild effect on blood sugar levels. You are still training the taste buds to want sweet flavors when you use a glyceride. So if you're trying to change your diet to reduce sugars, as we all should, using a glycerite is not going to move you forward there. A tincture would be better for that. But elderberry glycerite is awesome. And I like to do the elderberry and flower. I think elderflower is underused. And elderberry, I think, is overused. So balance the two of them, and you're good. So I'm going to grind my my herbs. I want them ground as finely as possible because that condenses it down. So again, like in the tincture class, we'll see that this is 3 ounces of herb right now. And if we put 3 would be 15 ounces of our menstruum in a 1:5 ratio, right? And that would kind of just barely cover it. And we want better coverage than that. So I'm going to grind it to get to have it compressed down more, and also to get better extraction. What I love about NutriBullets as grinders, if you use coffee grinders, I urge you to get a NutriBullet because, I mean, look at the volume. If you are tired of filling up your little coffee grinder container 4 or 5 times in order to do a batch of herbs, this is so much better. So in grinding, we've moved from this volume down to this volume. So we're going to be able to get that 1:5 ratio. We wouldn't be able to get a 1:5 ratio if we didn't grind it down. And so what would happen is the glycerin, the menstruum that we need to cover it with would necessarily be higher. We'd have a higher ratio, which means that our resulting medicine would be weaker. And we don't want weaker medicine. We want stronger medicine. So, so I grind up my herbs I've got. Let me write this down. So we've got 3 ounces by weight of our herb. So we're going to have 5 ounces by volume of our menstruum. So that's 15 ounces of our menstruum. Now, if I was doing it from my glycerin and water separately, I would then need to take 15 ounces and find 75% of 15 ounces, which would be a little bit under 4. Sorry, a little under 12, a little over 12, around 12, 12 ounces, a little under 12 ounces. And do all of that, which you can do. But because I've pre-made my dilute menstruum, all I need to do is measure out 15 ounces of this. It's much easier that way. So, I will get my measuring cup and measure out 15 ounces. Makes sense? 15 ounces is almost 16 ounces. That's about 2 cups. Oh, hey. And we're going to put our herbs into our jar. If you don't have canning jar funnels, you need canning jar funnels. They are one of the best tools that I have. So often when people come in to my apothecary and I'm like filling bags up for them and all of that, they're like, oh, look at that funnel. They're great funnels. They're made to fill on canning jars, but they fill lots of other ones too. And yeah, into bags and just, they're good. All right, so here's my, my ground California poppy, and I'm going to cover it with my 15 ounces of glycerin. And then we'll shake this up. And again, because I ground it up, I've got a nice coverage of the plant material. This would be really thick and not really, not that fluid right now, which would mean that you would be limited in its ability to be a good solvent, right? If you don't have the solution moving over the mark, if you don't have the liquid moving over the plant material, while you're extracting, if it's just kind of stagnant like that, you're not getting full extraction of the plant material. You need movement. You need we saw this in the very first Tuesday morning class that I did with you with the tea. Remember when we were doing the hibiscus tea and we saw the water movement from an area of high concentration in saturation of the plant material, and because it was saturated, it became heavier and it would move down and then bring the menstruum with a lower concentration, bring it up, and so you have that constant movement of menstruum and increasing that solubility. So you want some movement in your glycerite. And it's okay to add a little bit more, which you may have to do later on today or tomorrow as it absorbs. The plant material is dried, right? So it's going to absorb some of the fluid there. And so we're going to check in on that later on today or tomorrow and see if it still is relatively liquid. And if not, and actually it's starting to get a bit more viscous, even just standing there. So I probably am going to have to cover that. Again, I usually make a fresh plant glycerite with this. I don't usually make a dried plant. It's going to be fine as a dried plant medicine because the constituents that we use in California poppy are stable in drying, so it's not a problem. I'm in Southern California. California poppies are super abundant. So I'm probably going to have to top this off, and it may end up being like a 1 to 6 instead of a 1 to 5, but we started as a 1 to 5. All right, so we figure out our glycerin deal. We dilute it or not, or do the math. We figure our herb. The herbs that we use for glycerites are generally herbs that are going to be, that make good teas. If they like extraction in water, they're probably going to like extraction in glycerin. Glycerin is not a good solvent for non-polar chemicals in plants. So resinous compounds, worthless in a glycerite. They're not going to come out. A white sage glycerite, a waste of white sage. A glycerite of frankincense or myrrh, why do it? A frankincense of pinyon pine resin, any of those resinous plants, even calendula. I wouldn't make a glycerite of calendula because so much of the value of the calendula is in those, well, a lot of the like antimicrobial and antifungal qualities of the calendula, but also all of the the carotenoids that are in there, right? All of that lutein is not going to be soluble in the glycerite. Aromatics, water-soluble constituents, pull out very, very nicely. Can you grind chamomile flowers down? Yeah, so I talked about the chamomile right at the beginning. That's one of my favorite ones. That's the one I took the shot of. The chamomile flowers. Yeah, you just grind it down. There's a little bit left in my little dose cup. You can see that beautiful chamomile gold color. That's a chamomile glycerite. It is wonderful. Chamomile is one of my favorite glycerites. So choose any plants. If you can make a tea out of it, chances are really good it's going to make a fine glycerite. Hi, Terry. But I really love glycerites for aromatic plants. I think that's where glycerites shine. So the downsides to a glycerite, let's just talk about those. Number one, not really good for nonpolar compounds. There has to be a certain amount of water solubility of the constituents to be able to be pulled out of the glycerite. Number two, it's a highly refined product, right? You can't make glycerite at home. Well, you can. You make glycerin at home whenever you make soap at home by that chemical reaction. It's just you can't pull it out and separate it out. You don't have the methods to do that. Milky oats. Milky oats is one of my favorite glycerites. I was just about to talk about that, Tricia, so I will get back to milky oats because, oh, hell yes, milky oats glycerite. What was I talking about before Tricia? Before Tricia so really interrupted me. Solubility. Anyway, so yeah, water-soluble stuff. Aromatics, that's what I was saying. So aromatic compounds really, really shine. My favorite, my number one favorite glycerite, above all others, and I really encourage you to make this, is, rose. Rose is the number one glycerite of many people. I just refilled this and I didn't prime the pump, so it's all spitting at me. So rose glycerite is people's favorite glycerite, but I make a rose and cardamom glycerite. Oh, Tulsi is also really good. Rose cardamom glycerite, that's what this one is. Rose and cardamom. I know, it's amazing we let you hang out with us, Tricia. Rose glycerite is lovely, that sweetness of the glycerin and then the aromatics of the rose. I really love making a rose glycerite and use, instead of just water as the water, use a hydrosol, use rose hydrosol for that. So a rose hydrosol diluted with glycerin and then extracted. Oh man, and I like that even better. What I do with my rose is I have rose and a little bit of roselle of hibiscus to bump up the anthocyanins, the red pigments. And that makes a deep, deep, deep red color. The acidity of the hibiscus offsets a little bit of the sweetness, just the cloying sweetness of the glycerite, and it just makes it a beautiful blood red color. I don't have any. I ran out of it, and so I'm making some right now, so I can't show you. But it's just deep, deep, deep red color from the hibiscus. Tiny little pinch of hibiscus just to bump that up. But the rose cardamom is fucking amazing. It's so good, and I strongly encourage you to make a rose cardamom, or again the chamomile as an aromatic works really well too. Chamomile, milky oats. In spring, milky oats glycerite has become almost as popular. I go through gallons of milky oats tincture. So, I do, as we all do, harvest all my milky oats in the spring and then bring them home right away and then make them into 3 different things. This year I have a new milky oats compound that I'm really eager to share with you. But the primary things that I make are the tincture and the glycerite. And years ago, I was just making kind of a little bit of the glycerite, but that's increased more and more and more because, think about the fact that milky oats tincture is used therapeutically with really good results for treatment of addictions. And sometimes those addictions, we're not really wanting to use alcohol. So milky oats glycerite for that. For people who, I've given my sons tinctures since they were tiny, but some people don't like to give their children or themselves, for whatever reason. Don't need to know people's reasons. If they don't want to use alcohol, they don't need to use alcohol. And And fresh milky oats as a glycerite is very good medicine. It's a very, very good medicine. So, hell yes. And because it's a fresh milky oats, this would be made just like a fresh plant tincture in a 1-to-2 ratio with the undiluted glycerin. Just like a 1-to-2 tincture with the undiluted alcohol, right? Did I say tincture? I meant glycerite. A 1-to-2 glycerite. Undiluted glycerin with the fresh milky oats. Dried oats don't work the same way. Dried oats are basically oat straw in terms of the nutritional benefits, because the constituents, the unique alkaloids that are found in the fresh milky oat tops that give it the really profoundly nourishing and restorative effects on the nervous system are destroyed in the drying process. I love oats and I love oat tops, but they are not the same as fresh oats. So, so fresh plant milky oats, yes, 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 absolutely. I didn't take my shot of Lisa, hi Lisa, of rose cardamom glyceride. Oh my God, that's the sexiest thing in the whole world. That is so good. Damn. All right. I am going to continue with the medicine making. Okay. So, and I have one more glycerite that I'm going to save for later for you. So here is our glycerite that we've made that we are going to label, because label your stuff. Never, never, never do the, I will totally remember what this thing is. I don't have to label it. I will remember what it is. You're not going to. Hi, sweetheart. You're not going to remember it, and you're going to end up with unlabeled bottles of stuff that you can't bear to throw out because you made it. It must have been meaningful to you, but you don't remember what it was. I will bet you $5 that you will do that. So, label your stuff. So this is California Poppy, dried, and it is from Oshala Farms, and it is a 1 to 5, 75%, and the date. Now, there's two ways that we can progress with this glycerite. We can let this sit like a standard tincture. We can let this sit for however long you let things extract. Again, I kind of went over this in the tincture. I think that we let things stand for way too long, and I don't think they need a month or a lunar cycle or however you measure. I think that most tinctures and mini glycerites are usually done within a week. And I am going to be supported by that as soon as the studies that are being done on that are 3 roller balls. Oh, Terry, right? Yeah, yeah. I will totally remember. Or I do it in the middle of a class, right? I'm making a class. I'm going to set this down. I have one right over there that I did for a class, and I poured a little 1 ounce bottle to pass around as a sample, thinking I will remember what this is. I kind of know what it is, but I'm not really sure. All right, so my label's on there. So there's 2 ways that we can process here. So we can let this sit and do a cold extraction. It will, Francesca, and I will talk about that, yeah, because light is definitely one of the things that degrades stuff. So thank you for bringing that up, and I will talk about that. But we're not concerned about shelf life right now, because right now we're in extraction, right? We're not in storage. What I like to do with my not delicate plant, so I don't do this with rose. I would do it with cardamom because it's not delicate, but I don't do this with rose. I don't do it with lemon balm, but with many other things, and I'll do it with the California Poppy. I do what's called a sealed simmer extraction. So I'm applying heat to this to enhance the extraction. With a sealed simmer process, you're just putting it in here, putting the top on, pop it in and do a double boiler, bain-marie. I'm going to put it into a water bath and bring that water bath up, and I'm going to simmer it for about 45 minutes. It's a leaf and flower, so it's pretty light material, so it's not going to need much. About 45 minutes should be fine. So I'm going to bring it up to simmer. I'm going to simmer it for about 45 minutes, and then I'll turn it off and let it cool down, let it sit overnight, and tomorrow I will press this, and I will have an extracted California poppy. By using heat, we don't have to use the length of time, right? So you're going to use one or the other. Either let it sit for a week, or if you are stubbornly insistent on doing the month thing, or if you do lunar cycles, other people do lunar cycles because that's part of their medicine making. That's a whole different issue, and I will not, I can't argue with you about that. If that's part of your medicine making, if the ritual of a lunar cycle is part of your medicine making, then have that be part of your medicine making. But if you're just doing it for complete extraction of the constituents, it doesn't make sense that we can make a tea out of something in 15 minutes, but we have to let it sit in alcohol and water, very strong solvents, for a month for extraction. It just doesn't make sense. And the same thing with the glycerites, especially, again, if we are applying heat. If we're applying heat to it, it's going to extract very quickly. So I wouldn't do that, say, with rose, because the aromatics in rose are so delicate that heat will damage them. It'll alter that. So, but rose also extracts so quickly, there's no reason to do that anyway. So rose, I will do a cold extraction. I'll let it sit for a week and press it, and it's done. So that's what I'm going to do with the California poppy as soon as I'm done here. Yeah, you could total double boiler, absolutely. I don't think it's necessary to do a double boiler. Well, I guess if you are you meaning just putting the plant material and the glycerin and water into the top of a double boiler and do it that way? If it's in a jar, then I would just put it right in the water and do a water bath. But however, as long as you're applying heat. You wash your strain mark in alcohol to get all the medicine. I take my strained mark in my pressing cloth and I put it into a jar and pour hot water over it and basically make the mark into a tea bag. And I just drink that as a tea bag. But in the alcohol is great. Yeah. As long as you're not doing the double boiler over the heat. Sometimes you do your double boiler so that it's not down in the water, it's above it, it's surrounded by the steam. It's a more gentle way of moving heat in there. I think it's too gentle, really, for the process. But yeah, heating, whatever you do for heating. So you can do a sealed simmer, and then it's done basically by the next day, or you can let it sit for X amount of time for extraction. And then you're going to press it in the same way as you press for a tincture. Pour it through either cloth, or a nut bag, any type of a strainer, and then strain that out. Strain all of your plant material out, and then you have your leftover mark, as Terry said with hers. She washes the strain mark in alcohol to kind of wash that out to get the extra medicine out, or you can make it into a tea. You can throw it into your bath and make it into a bath. So when you have something like a rose glycerite or a cardamom glycerite or any glycerites of plants that are also therapeutic for the skin, right? Chamomile is really exceptional for skin. It's powerfully anti-inflammatory for the skin and vulnerary. And glycerin is hygroscopic. Hygroscopic, it draws, not hydroscopic, hygroscopic. So it draws moisture to itself, right? So you see glycerin added to a lot of moisturizers, because when we apply glycerin to the skin, it is going to draw moisture to itself and draw moisture to the skin, which is a great thing to do if you are in an environment where there is a lot of moisture. If you're in a very dry environment, then it's going to draw moisture from the closest area, which is the underlying tissues in the skin, and it can cause some dehydration of the skin. So, so you always want to kind of keep that in account if you are using glycerin in your skincare products. But you can use your chamomile glycerite in skincare products. I'm making a facial wash with the rose cardamom, which is really, really fabulous. It's just a facial wash with rose cardamom glycerite and the essential oils in it. So I smell that. That's a fabulous way to wake up in the morning, is the smell of rose and cardamom on your face. I don't know why I got distracted talking about that. Anyway, nope, it wasn't you. It's not your fault. Nope, I just got distracted. Okay, so so you'll strain your glycerin, and then you will store it. So going back to, I think it was Francesca was asking, glycerites can definitely be used topically. Anywhere that you would use glycerin in a formula, use your glycerite. If you're making a cream and it asks for glycerin, why just use plain glycerin when you can grab your rose glycerite or your chamomile glycerite and have those therapeutic effects added to it? It is very sticky. It's super, super sticky. And if you put too much glycerin into a formula, it will be sticky. That's just an indication that in the next batch you need to use a little bit less. It's not harmful for your skin. It's just sticky and unpleasant. So when you're storing it, you can store in glass bottles. I like to store all of mine in sealed systems like this. So this is how I store my tinctures and my glycerites, so that when I'm filling a bottle with it, I can just fill, and I'm not opening this up. The less I'm opening this up, the less there's going to be more oxygen going in there, more particulate matter in the air, more airborne pathogens, all sorts of cooties can get in there every time we open it up. So a closed system is the best way to store your stuff, any of your stuff. But you can store it if you don't have that, right? You can store it in a clear jar. Just you want to keep that clear jar in the dark. So you're absolutely right that this would not be a good method for storage because light coming in there. Also, many of us will make tinctures and have tinctures around in our apothecary shelves for years, waiting for us to press them. And sometimes, you'll go in and you'll siphon off some from the top, and eventually you'll get down to where you can't siphon off anymore and you have to extract it. That's fine to do with tinctures for 98% of plants. That's great because the alcohol is a very good preservative. It's just hanging out there. So yeah, leave it in there for as long as you need to. But you don't want to do that with glycerin because glycerin has a significantly shorter shelf life. I generally don't think glycerites will last for longer than a year. In like a clear container in a single-sized bottle, kept under storage correctly, cool and dry and dark, maybe 2 or 3 years. But they're pretty short, especially compared to tinctures. So I think that glycerite should be pressed rapidly and put into use rapidly. So making smaller batches, using it pretty quickly, I think is a good idea for glycerites. Glycerites, oils, and vinegars, shorter shelf life, so you should press them out. Tinctures, leave them in there for as long as you need to and get them out eventually. Dosing strategies for glycerites are going to be, a little bit more than tinctures. If you're used to taking a certain amount of a tincture, take a little bit more of the glycerite, generally. There's not clinical strength glycerites, so because it isn't an optimal solvent. It's not as good a solvent for most materials as tinctures are. So we don't have really specific dosing strategies for those. You take as much as you need to make it work, which is really ultimately the dosing strategy for everything, because there are no set dosages for all of our different bodies, all of our different livers, all of our different weights, all of our different sensitivities, all of our different abilities of digestion. All of that makes it impossible to have a set dosage for things, irrespective of the fact that you always see that written in books and on labels and all of that. It's not true for herbs, it's not true for medicines, it's not true for foods, it's not true for anything. And it's even less true for glycerites. So take as much as you need to make it work. The ratio of rose to cardamom. It is really easy to overdo it with the cardamom. No, because I really love cardamom, and it took me a while to learn to use a much lighter touch. Cardamom has a significant amount of bitterness to it. You know, when I'm making like a quart of the glycerite, I'll use about a tablespoon of cardamom, and I decorticate it, take it out of the green hulls, and grind it. Rose extracts very, very rapidly. You need that cardamom to extract rapidly too, and so you want to grind it to a pretty fine powder. Don't buy ground cardamom. That's funky. Buy the cardamom in the hulls and grind it yourself, and use the green cardamom. Black cardamom has a very, very different flavor and scent profile, and it's got its place. It's really lovely in savory foods and things like that, but it isn't equivalent to the green cardamom pods. Another favorite glycerite. I feel guilty like even telling people about this, but it's so awesome. Is, whoopsie, hold on, my dropper is being wonky. Oops. Is cacao glycerite. Cacao glycerite is chocolate syrup. It's, that doesn't work. It's chocolate syrup. You'll have to trust me on this. It tastes just like chocolate syrup. And that's one of the easiest things to make. And it's super handy if you want to modify the flavors of any of your other glycerites or your tinctures or, well, I use the green hulls. I'm going to break them open. I prefer the green cardamom over the black. I said don't use the black cardamom. That's the one that I said. But definitely use the green cardamom. That's a good one. So the cacao glycerite can be used as flavoring agents, but it can also be used as just a chocolate syrup. And I really like it for people who really have cravings for sweets and they really, really want the taste of something chocolatey. They don't need a whole lot. They don't need to eat something. They just want that flavor. Oh my God, you can take a dropper full of a cacao glycerite and you got, I just got a burst of chocolate. I just ate a piece of chocolate there. But all it is, this was the Trader Joe's fair trade organic cacao powder mixed into glycerin, into the dilute glycerin. You don't have to extract it because it goes into solution. You just mix it up. There's no pressing, there's not doing, you mix it up and then you put it in a bottle and yeah, Marty, me too. And it's so easy to do, and it's amazingly handy to use. So I really encourage you to do that. So yeah, Marcus, the fresh cardamom I have. Oh, hold on just a moment. Here's a little tiny baby cardamom. I have two huge cardamoms, but I can't bring them up here. But here's a little baby. This is a cardamom. And these leaves, if you crush the leaves, especially the young leaves, if you crush the young leaves, they are really lovely. It's a more floral, bright, sort of a greener color than the pods. And you're probably able to have your cardamom fruit down where you are, Marcus, but I have been told that I will not be able to have this fruit. So mostly I just have this to kind of smell the leaves. You can use the leaves to like wrap fish and steam fish in the leaves. It has kind of that bright, light, aromatic, sort of resinous flavor, but it's not nearly as intense as the seeds. But it's lovely and it's abundant. It's really easy to grow cardamom as a houseplant. So I urge people to grow it, and then you have cardamom growing. And there's like all sorts of good stuff about having cardamom growing with you. Let's see. So sealed simmer or let them sit. You're going to strain them. We've talked about dosing. We've talked about storage. Any other questions? I think I've covered everything. Glycerites are much easier to do than you can see than tinctures are. But do keep in mind that highly refined form, they are highly refined. They are, to a certain extent, sort of synthetic, and it has a little bit of that synthetic taste to it. It's not a whole food. Even the alcohol is certainly refined. It's not a oh yeah, Francesca, that's the question. I knew there was something I was forgetting. Alcohol is also refined, but you can make alcohol at home pretty easily, and you can't make glycerite at home, and that to me is kind of the marker of the level of refinement of a product. And so glycerin is pretty synthetic. But it's really handy to have something that is non-alcoholic and a relatively good, stable solvent. Relatively good, stable solvent. That isn't honey. Honey also is good. We'll talk about honey. Vinegar is good. We'll talk about vinegar. Oil, there's a lot of solvents that are good. This is also a solvent that is good. So it's one more tool in your toolkit. I think some people overuse them, but I think they have their place. And I think that some people denigrate them overly much. Glycerites have their place. And one of their places is the cacao, because the flavor of the chocolate in here is so strong that you don't really taste the synthetic-y flavor of the glycerin. They need to grow really big to produce fruits, okay. I have a cultivar that's supposed to produce in lowland. Why can't I get this to feed? There you go. Because they need tropical mountain climate to bear fruit. All right. Definitely I don't live in a tropical mountain climate. Oh well, I'm happy to have the plant because I have big plants, and they proliferate. They just grow and spread, so you can divide them up. You're constantly being able to give away plants. It's pretty cool to have them. Hi, Ellie. Made glycerin and dried, and retype that sentence, Ellie, because I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let's see. So any other questions? I think I covered pretty much everything that I wanted to in here, but if you have any other questions, we have a few minutes more. Hi, Ellie. So you can go back and watch the video. I got in a little bit after 10, whenever I got in here. When did I get in here? 9. I'm sorry. I got in here a little after 9. So I can stay for a little bit longer. Some plant work well with glycerin, doesn't work well with alcohol. So yeah, so alcohol is a better solvent for things that are nonpolar, things that aren't soluble in water. Remember that glycerin, the solubility is somewhat similar to water. So things, let's see. Marshmallow. Perfect example. Marshmallow glycerite is really, really handy. If you want the moistening qualities of marshmallow, you can't make it as a tincture because the alcohol denatures the polysaccharides and makes them turn into clumps of snot, and it's gross. So tincture of marshmallow doesn't work, but a glycerite of marshmallow is beautiful. I like same thing with like slippery elm. I am not at all a fan of grapeseed extract. I am very much not a fan of grapeseed extract. There is a tremendous amount of research now that shows that grapeseed extract only works as a preservative when it has synthetic preservatives, benzalkonium chloride, and various other synthetic preservatives added to it. Tincture, for example, out of them, or a CO2 extract, or any kind of extract of grapeseed, and have it be, actually I think you mean grapefruit seed, which is what I mean, a grape seed extract. It still wouldn't be appropriate here, but grape seed extract is fine. Grapefruit seed extract is toxic, gross chemical mess, and I don't use it, and I don't suggest that anyone uses it for anything. But the glycerin in the glycerites, the glycerin in the glycerites is a preservative. As long as you keep over, again, I like 75%. I'm trying to point behind me. I like 75% because I think it's a more effective preservative than the 66% glycerin. I don't like a 2-to-1. I like a 3-to-1. That's me. I think it makes a stronger preservation, and it's still liquefies it enough that the viscosity is able to penetrate the plant material. You can see, by the way, even now the poppy that we have is starting to extract. It's turning a lovely dark color. Oh, here's a thing. Plant material and glycerin, the plant material floats on top. In alcohol, the plant material is on the bottom. So you're never going to have the solvent kind of floating on top the way that you do with a tincture. That's okay. Just shake it up. That is a problem, especially if you have a 66% glycerite that you're making, if you're letting it sit for a month, because you can't cover up your plant material with the solvent because the plant material is floating on top of it, and that means that the plant material floating on top of the solvent is going to be a conduit for any pathogens to enter into your solvent, which is another reason for either fast extraction, not waiting a whole month, or doing the simmer extract using the heat. So passion flower leaves with glycerin. I see you made a glycerite and the herbs and it dried. Yeah, so we talked about that, Ellie, earlier. Sometimes the herbs will just suck up and absorb some of the glycerin. You have to add in more. So generally you want to look, usually within 24 hours, it will absorb as much as it absorbs. And you can see with this one, it was pretty liquid at the beginning of this class. But you can see that there's material sticking up right now. It's not floating as freely as it was in the menstruum. But that's okay because I'm going to simmer, extract this, so it's not going to have an opportunity to go funky. I'm going to simmer it for 45 minutes. I'll let it cool, and then I'm going to strain it tomorrow. So it is totally okay that the plant material is not covered by the menstruum. I don't need it to be because I'm doing the heat extraction. If you're letting it sit, then you do want to cover it up. You added no water. Was it fresh plant? Was it the fresh plant? Ellie, was it fresh plants or dried plants? Because if it was dried plants, you should have added water. It should have been a 75%, a 3-to-1 extract. There should have been water in there. Yeah, so at the very beginning, I talk about that. And sometimes some plants just need a little bit more because they just absorb more of the constituents. Okay, so yeah, add in a little bit more. It just absorbed everything. All right, so we're after 10, so I want to honor your time and and I need to open up. So let's see. Next class, we will be, the next Tuesday thing, we will be doing vinegar extracts. So, and in the vinegar extracts, we will talk about making a vinegar extract of fresh milky oats. That's my new favorite thing, and it's pretty awesome. So we'll talk about vinegar extracts and also oxymels. Did I do that already? I don't think I did. Oh, there's people. Hello. Okay, gotta go because there's people here. Love you too, Ellie. Come and see me when you get better. See you later. Bye.